Hey, folks, good morning and welcome to another episode of Steelers Morning Rush. I'm Alan Saunders. It is Friday, April 4th. Happy Friday, everybody. Hope it's a good one for you. Going to be a good one for me here. I wrote this morning on SteelersNow.com. Go there, please, and subscribe to SN Plus if you haven't already to get an ad-free reading experience when you're there and to help support our journalism. I wrote about the safety position and how the Steelers have been showing an unexpected level of interest in it. Now, if you are a regular listener to the podcasts here on the YouTube channel or in the podcast platform, I'm sure you're familiar with Smitty and I talking a lot about that over the last couple of weeks. So that probably isn't a surprise to you. And I broke down the reasons for the Steelers' interest. The fact that they've been to the pro days of several of the top guys with Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan at Alabama and Georgia and Notre Dame and Texas. And also sort of talked about how you can kind of say, well, yeah, but those schools have a lot of other guys that are really good. And but there's just stuff you can't get away from. They had Jalen Reed from Penn State at a combine formal. They sent Gerald Alexander to South Carolina to work out Nick Emmanwori. There's no other reason to do that unless you're interested in drafting those guys. And so I think it's pretty clear that the Steelers have safety on their draft board this year. And I wrote a lot about all of that, but I kind of glossed over the why because, well, I'm not really sure. And so let's speculate. The podcast is a good place for that. They have Minkah Fitzpatrick under contract through the end of the 2026 season. Deshaun Elliott was so good last year in his first season with the Steelers, but is entering the final season of his contract. They brought in Juan Thornhill, former Cleveland Browns starter, to be their number 3 safety. And they have special teamer Miles Killebrew, and they have last year's 6th-round pick Ryan Watts, although his status coming off that neck injury last preseason is probably a good bit up in the air. Okay, so this year, they do not need a safety. They'll have Minkah, they'll have Elliott, they'll have Thornhill, they'll have Killebrew, maybe they'll have Watts. Even if they don't have Watts, they certainly don't need a safety of the level of caliber of draft pick that we're talking about. They want to use one in the 6th round to replace Watts if you're not sure if he's going to be back. Okay, fine. But they certainly do not need this season to be using a high draft pick on a safety. Okay, but what about the future? Well, that's where it gets a little more complicated because, Minkah and Elliott are 2 very different players, right? I mean, Minkah's a coverage safety, a free safety. Elliott's a box safety, a strong safety. And the players that they're looking at are all over the map in terms of their the way they profile at the next level. Xavier Watts from Notre Dame, one of my favorite players in this class, by the way, is the kind of safety that could be a slot corner, maybe. That could definitely be that 3rd safety if they want to really lean into playing 3 safeties all the time in their nickel package. I could see Xavier Watts being that. But he's 5'11", 204, okay? So just that's short and that's fairly stout, right? 5'11", 204. Minkah, coming out of college, anyway, who knows what he weighs now. Minkah, 6 foot flat, 204. Okay, so roughly the same size. Maybe a little shorter, but whatever. You could see Xavier Watts drafting as a player that could play in the slot a lot in 2025 and be eventually groomed as a replacement for Minkah Fitzpatrick. Remember, Minkah's under contract for 2 more seasons, but he's got an expensive cap hit in 2026. The Steelers may not want to pay $24 million. I don't know what it's like $17.6 million, I think, if I'm doing the math in my head right, in 2026 for Minkah Fitzpatrick. So I can see drafting Xavier Watts, playing him in the slot now, and grooming him as an eventual Minkah replacement. I can see that. But Nick Emmanwori is a completely different player. Nothing at all like Watts. He's the strong safety, a box safety, an overhang defender. He's a replacement for Elliott. Now, Elliott was so good this year. He's not that old. I have a really hard time. Why would the Steelers not want to re-sign him? I don't know. But Emmanwori is 6'3", 220. Okay, so that's like a completely different player. And the Steelers are looking at both of them. So what are they doing? I don't honestly really know. Maybe they don't want to. Maybe they want to sign Deshaun Elliott, and get rid of Minkah. But then why look at Emmanwori? Maybe they want to replace Minkah, but it almost doesn't make sense. It's almost just like they're looking at all of the DBs and maybe just trying to add talent to the room. I don't know. There isn't really a thread here through these that I can make sense of. I mean, Emmanwori is just a freak. 10-0 RAS, the best tested strong safety of all time. And so maybe they just want to go see the circus. Maybe they just wanted to see what the best athlete at the strong safety position ever in the history of combine and pro day testing looks like. I don't know. But there's not a clear and obvious path here. The one thing I will say is this. The Steelers wanted very badly when they signed DeMonte KZ to go to a 3 safety nickel and use it a lot. And there were a lot of things that happened in the 3 years that DeMonte KZ was here that largely prevented them from doing that. KZ was injured. KZ was suspended. KZ was injured again. KZ was suspended again. Fitzpatrick was injured multiple times. All the rest of the safeties got injured multiple times. It's been some trials and tribulations. But last year they largely had those 3 safeties available to them. And you remember even against the Baltimore Ravens, remember the Ravens playoff game where they're lining up with Isaiah Likely and the Steelers are countering with nickel because they're treating Likely like a wide receiver. And that's fair because Likely is really hard to cover. But the Ravens run the ball down their throats because the Steelers are in nickel and Likely is a better blocker than Cam Sutton, who was covering him. Cam Sutton couldn't cover him either. And I just wonder if the Steelers are look at the relative lack of investment in the slot cornerback position. They brought in Brandon Echols, who's fine, but has never really done the job, even though I think he'll be better as a slot corner than he has been outside. But it's not like they went and signed a starter as a slot corner. Maybe the idea is to just have a base nickel with 3 safeties, where the third safety is a starter. And if you have 3 starting safeties, that gives you freedom to kind of pick whatever body type you like to be the third one. Emmanwori, although big, is certainly fast enough to cover the likes of Isaiah Likely and Travis Kelce. In fact, he would be probably a better version of Terrell Edmonds in that, and he was very good as a tight end cover man. So that's the only thing I can think of here is that you look at the interest in safeties of various degrees, and you look at the lack of interest in slot corners, and you think, well, they're just going to go to a 3 safety base nickel. That's the only thing I can come up with that makes sense from this pattern of draft interest. Or maybe it's just all nothing. I don't know. We'll see what they end up doing. But if they draft a safety highly, I think that's the road they're going down more than either saying we don't want Minkah Fitzpatrick or we don't want Deshaun Elliott, because the way they're going about the looking doesn't fit either of those other ideas. All right. Let me know what you think about that. That's some serious speculation, but I think I got to a good idea by the end of it. And we'll be back with more. I will not be, but we, the royal we, to quote the dude, Smitty, DB, afternoon drive here, 6 o'clock. I'm checking out early on a Friday, and we'll be back with more on Monday, or, something crazy happens over the weekend. Maybe we'll pop in. We've been known to do it from time to time. Make sure you like, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications here on the YouTube channel so you don't miss episodes, Steelers Morning Rush, Steelers Afternoon Drive, and all the rest of the stuff we got going on here on the YouTube platform. And, of course, until next time, thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and enjoy.